So imagine you are driving at night.
Okay.
You glance down at your dashboard, and everything looks absolutely perfect. Your speed is steady, fuel level is high, engine temperature is completely normal. Like every single indicator light is this comforting, steady green.
Right. Telling you everything is fine.
Exactly. It tells you the system is operating exactly as designed, but your headlights only illuminate a few feet ahead of you. And because of that super narrow field of vision, you can't see that the bridge you are rapidly approaching has completely collapsed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a terrifying image.
Right, because your instruments aren't broken.
Yeah.
They're perfectly accurate. They are just measuring the exact wrong things.
Yeah, mostly because of the false confidence it gives you, right? Like
Right.
the collapse is happening entirely outside the measurement boundary of that dashboard.
Exactly.
And by the time the reality of the environment actually registers, it's way too late to hit the brakes.
And that gap between the comforting green lights on our societal dashboards and the actual collapsing reality of our environment, that is the focus of our deep dive today.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. We are unpacking this profound and honestly kind of unsettling book by systems thinker Bashar Ourabi. It's called By Design: How Progress Became the Mechanism of Collapse.
Right.
And his core premise is that modern civilization isn't failing by accident or, even necessarily by incompetence.
Yeah.
It is collapsing because it is doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Right.
Like it's optimizing highly measurable systems while quietly consuming the invisible, unmeasured environments that actually sustain them.
And I think it's important to set the stage here because the goal of this analysis isn't to just demonize progress.
Yeah, of course not.
It's really about interrogating the specific, historically contingent definition of progress that we have hard-coded into our institutions.
Yeah, the stuff we just accept as normal.
Exactly. We are looking at systems that brilliantly reward rational behavior, but then they produce collective consequences that literally no one intended.
So if you are listening to this and you've ever felt this bizarre sense of overwhelm, like the world seems to be simultaneously highly efficient, but incredibly fragile.
Oh, totally.
Or, that digital engagement is at an all-time high while human attention is rapidly deteriorating. Well, this deep dive offers a framework to understand exactly why that is happening.
It really gives you a totally different lens to look through.
It does.
Yeah.
So let's move from that abstract dashboard analogy to a very grounded historical situation that the author investigates. It's a logistics crisis in a port city.
Right, the food shortage.
Yeah, it started as a food shortage, but it serves as this perfect laboratory for his whole civilizational argument.
Yeah, so the city in question experienced this severe disruption where the northern districts basically went without food for 3 days.
Which is wild for a modern city.
Completely. And the authorities had recently implemented this strict new compliance framework for the food distribution network, primarily to improve accountability and eliminate waste.
Sure, sounds like a good thing on paper.
Exactly. And the dashboard for this compliance framework showed perfect performance. The metrics were flawless.
But the reality was...
The reality was that truck drivers were flat out refusing to deliver food to the northern districts.
Okay, wait. Why would they refuse? I mean, the food was sitting right there and people were hungry.
Well, because entering the designated distribution zone under the new compliance rules meant navigating this absolute bureaucratic labyrinth.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if a driver made a minor administrative error, or even if like a local delay pushed them past their allotted time window, they risked an automatic 90-day suspension of their commercial license.
Wow, 90 days.
Right. So the drivers weren't malicious. They weren't incompetent. The system simply made refusal the most rational choice.
Because if they stayed outside the zone, their livelihood was totally secure. And
Exactly. If they entered, they risked losing their income for 3 months. So the compliance framework successfully eliminated waste, but it did so by transferring the entire cost of accountability directly onto the most vulnerable node in the supply chain.
the drivers.
The drivers, yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It's kind of like a straight-A student who is completely sleep-deprived and miserable. Like the metric, the report card looks flawless, but the underlying biological system is collapsing.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
Or it's like a CEO boasting about record-breaking quarterly profits because they successfully dumped all their factory's toxic waste into the river next door.
Right. The spreadsheet is flawless, but the ecosystem is dead.
Right. So are we just measuring the wrong things, or does the act of measuring itself force us to externalize costs onto people without power?
Well, what's fascinating here is that is the core mechanism of civilizational collapse, according to Ourabi.
Really? Just that transfer of cost.
Yeah. It happens when the architecture of a system allows cost to be transferred onto future generations, or onto ecological systems, or onto marginalized communities that basically don't have a political voice.
So it's not villains twirling their mustaches.
Not at all. Rational actors within the system will transfer those costs, not out of evil intent, but because the architecture makes it the most logical move.
Yeah.
The system's boundary is simply drawn too small.
It excludes the larger environment. It actually depends on to function.
Precisely.
Okay, so if the narrow boundaries of our metrics are the root problem causing these invisible collapses, how do you actually redraw them without breaking the entire supply chain?
Well, the author introduces a specific toolkit for this. It's centered around a character named Malik.
Right, the data journal.
Yeah, he was managing the city's logistics. And Malik is the one who realizes his highly efficient food distribution algorithm is secretly depleting the city.
How so?
Well, during the crisis, formal logistics failed, right? But the city was temporarily stabilized by informal community networks.
Like neighbors sharing resources, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Local merchants extending credit, neighbors helping neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
But Malik's optimized algorithm, by bypassing these local hubs just to save a few minutes of delivery time, was systematically starting the very networks that acted as the city's safety net.
Oh, wow. So his efficiency was killing the backup system.
Exactly. So he realizes he has to redraw the boundaries, and he spends 4 days basically rebuilding his entire algorithm using 3 fundamental questions.
Okay, let's walk through those 3 questions because they really form the crux of the book's actionable advice.
Yeah, they're super important. So first question, does the system account for its environment?
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning he had to ask if his model boundary was drawn at the edge of what was easy to measure, like, fuel costs and transit time, or at the edge of what the system actually depended on.
Which included the economic health of those local merchants.
Right. Second question, what is the honest time horizon?
Oh, I love that phrasing. Honest time horizon.
Yeah, because if you optimize strictly for tomorrow's efficiency, you might deplete a resource whose loss only becomes visible during the next crisis.
Which could be months or years away.
Exactly.
And then the third question he asks is, what is the carried forward balance?
Right.
Like, are we building or depleting the capacity to perform tomorrow? What is the net position on the ledger once you account for all those invisible costs?
Yeah. And when Malek forces his algorithm to answer those 3 questions, he fundamentally changes the routing parameters.
He actually routes trucks through the informal community networks, doesn't he?
He does. And the result is that his rebuilt algorithm becomes 8% less efficient by the original metric.
8%.
Yeah. Deliveries take slightly longer, fuel costs go up a fraction. But the system becomes 42% more resilient to external shocks.
That's a huge trade-off.
It is. The original system was quietly consuming the community every single day just to maximize speed. The new one is neutral. Malek calls that 8% drop in efficiency the cost of honesty.
The cost of honesty. I mean, I hear Malik's success story, but let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also really difficult. If a CEO goes on a quarterly earnings call and says, hey, profits are down 8% because we decided to pay the cost of honesty and account for our environmental externalities.
Wall Street will fire them by noon.
Literally by noon.
Yeah.
So how does this framework actually survive contact with modern capitalism?
Mm-hmm.
Because efficiency is what built the modern world. It lifted billions out of poverty.
Yeah, right.
It feels like the author is asking a runaway train to politely stop.
Well, the author acknowledges the immense power of capitalism, totally. But he points out a fatal paradox.
Okay.
The premise of the invisible hand that individual rational self-interest produces collective benefit is conditionally true.
Conditionally.
Yeah, it works brilliantly when externalities are negligible and the commons are legally protected. But outside those specific conditions, the mechanism inverts and self-interest destroys the collective benefit. The market is brilliant, but it is what Ourabi calls a layer tool.
A layer tool. Can you explain that concept?
Sure, think of a hammer. A hammer is an exceptionally efficient tool for driving nails. It functions perfectly at the let's say, economy layer of building a house.
Okay, makes sense.
But you would never use a hammer to test the structural integrity of the foundation, right?
Right.
Or to evaluate the architectural blueprints. Using a market metric like quarterly profit to evaluate long-term ecological sustainability or collective institutional trust is like using a hammer to check a foundation.
You will get an answer, but that answer will be confidently wrong.
Exactly. We are mistakenly using a layer tool as our overarching civilizational foundation. We're demanding that it solve problems it wasn't even designed to perceive.
So if our institutional systems refuse to pay that 8% cost of honesty because the market layer tool punishes them for it, what is the actual thing being consumed? Like, who actually pays the price for that missing 8%?
Well, the book grounds this in a deeply personal story about a woman named Hannah.
Yeah, the story of Hannah really stood out to me.
It's powerful. Hannah represents the actual unmeasured system that absorbed the disruption during the Port City crisis.
Right, because she ran this informal lending operation in the Northern District.
Exactly. Operating entirely out of a physical notebook. And she did this for 22 years.
Just a notebook.
Just a notebook. She recorded names, amounts, dates, and she charged zero interest. She personally saved 11 families from ruin during the food shortage by organizing these shared bulk purchases.
And yet she was entirely invisible to the ministry's official recovery data.
Completely invisible.
Because Hannah's notebook isn't just a heartwarming story of charity. I mean, in systems thinking terms, her knowledge of her community is an unscalable, high-fidelity data set.
Exactly. Centralized algorithms literally cannot perceive it because it lacks legibility.
Legibility. That concept is so crucial here.
It really is. Formal, scalable credit algorithms are designed to replace people like Hannah because algorithms are infinitely more, quote-unquote, efficient. But to achieve that scale, they destroy what the author calls the inner glow.
The inner glow.
Yeah. The inner glow is the capacity to see another person specifically.
Yeah.
Not as a demographic or a credit score or a user engagement metric, but as an irreducible human being navigating a complex life.
Because the formal credit algorithm has no column on its spreadsheet for what it is actually consuming.
Not at all.
Like, Hannah's knowledge of which specific family is struggling because of a temporary illness versus, chronic mismanagement that isn't just data. It is the product of 22 years of being genuinely present in her community.
Right. And when a society replaces that high-fidelity human insight with a standardized credit score, it is actively destroying its own civilizational infrastructure.
Wow.
And we see this playing out far beyond logistics and credit scores. It is a phenomenon Ourabi calls the inner-outer drift.
Okay, the inner-outer drift. I think about this constantly. We systematically replace our unmeasurable humanity with legible, trackable metrics just because the metrics are easier to manage at scale.
Yeah, totally.
It happens in our daily lives all the time. Like, we track our daily steps on our smartwatches, we obsess over our follower counts, we optimize for inbox zero at work.
Right.
But there is no dashboard metric for how deeply you listen to a friend who is struggling today.
Exactly. The outer metrics, the title, the portfolio, the engagement rate, they are highly legible and instantly rewarded.
While the inner life is progressively made economically invisible.
And the slow tragedy of this drift is the paralysis it induces in the people who are actually operating the systems.
Yeah, the story of Tala.
Yes. The author shares this vignette of a mid-level bureaucrat named Tala. She is sitting in her office eating cold rice at 11:30 at night.
Just a totally relatable, modern image.
Right. And she's feeling this profound, nauseating unease about the reports she is filing. She senses that the data she is pushing upward is completely disconnected from the reality on the ground.
Like she knows something is deeply wrong.
She knows it. But the system's enforcement mechanisms and its immediate rewards make it entirely rational for her to just, suppress that feeling, file the report, and keep her job.
So listening to you describe this high-fidelity human data set being squeezed out by these dashboards, my immediate thought is we are currently building machines designed to do nothing but optimize dashboards.
Oh, yeah. You mean AI?
Yes. If human measurement is already causing this inner-outer drift, is artificial intelligence just going to pour gasoline on this?
The short answer is yes. And the chapter titled The Agent Replaced details exactly why.
Because historically, the human agents operating our systems were flawed, right?
They're flawed. They were imprecise. But that human irrationality, the hesitation, the empathy, the very unease that Tala felt eating her cold rice, that acted as protective noise within the system.
Protective noise.
Yeah. It was a friction. A corrective mechanism that could sometimes catch a catastrophic metric before it caused a full-blown crisis.
Yeah.
Like a human bank manager might look at a technically failing loan application and decide, based on local context, to grant an extension anyway.
But AI has zero protective noise.
None. It optimizes flawed, incomplete objective functions with terrifying, perfect fidelity and continuous speed.
Right. It's like telling a self-driving car to get you to the airport as fast as possible, but forgetting to explicitly program in the rule, don't drive on the sidewalk.
Exactly. The AI isn't malicious at all.
It doesn't hate pedestrians.
No. It is just lethally obedient to an incomplete command.
Which fundamentally reframes the traditional AI alignment problem, doesn't it?
It really does. The popular fear is that artificial intelligence will become self-aware, develop its own goals, and, outsmart humanity like Terminator.
Right.
Ourabi argues the deeper, more immediate danger is that we honestly do not know what we want. Our objective functions systematically exclude the broader environment and completely ignore the carried-forward balance.
So we are feeding AI the exact same narrow dashboards that are already causing civilizational collapse, but we're removing the human friction that slows the collapse down.
Exactly. And to illustrate the fragility of this path, the author brings in this fascinating thought experiment. The solar flare scenario.
Okay, what's that?
Imagine if a massive geomagnetic storm struck the Earth tomorrow and instantly wiped out all digital infrastructure.
Oh, man.
The power grid, the internet, global supply chains, financial records, AI servers, all gone in an instant.
If that outer dashboard goes completely dark, what actually survives?
Exactly. What's left? The only things left are the unmeasurable inner investments, the local community networks, the deep human relationships, the physical knowledge held in Hannah's notebook.
Which forces a pretty profound question. Are we building a civilization for ourselves, or are we building it for the black boxes?
Right. Because if we relentlessly optimize away all of those informal, high-fidelity human networks in the name of efficiency, a crisis like a solar flare leaves us with absolutely nothing.
We will have zero resilience. That actually raises a huge historical question for me.
Okay.
If modern systems are so rigidly hyper-optimizing for the next quarter, how did humanity ever manage to build things that were explicitly meant to last centuries?
Right.
I mean, think about cathedrals that took 5 generations of stonemasons to complete, or ancient irrigation systems designed to last 1,000 years. How did they overcome the rational impulse to just optimize for immediate survival?
Well, the author looks back at history and points to a mechanism that modern secular society often kind of misunderstands.
What's this?
The concept of the afterlife and religious faith.
Wait, before we dive into the religious aspect, let's define the financial concept he uses to explain this. He talks about faith acting as a discount rate correction.
Yes.
Now, in finance, a discount rate is basically how much less we value a reward in the future compared to right now, right?
Exactly.
Like $100 today is worth more to me than $100 10 years from now.
Right, because of uncertainty, inflation, all of that.
So how exactly does heaven or an afterlife alter that math for a human being?
Well, in a purely secular biological framework, a rational actor's discount rate basically drops to zero the moment they die.
Because they're not there.
Right. There is no personal rational incentive to invest labor today for a payoff that happens 100 years from now, because you won't be there to enjoy it.
Okay.
But religious architectures historically functioned to extend a person's time horizon far beyond their own mortality.
Crazy.
If you believe your actions today echo into eternity or dictate the state of your soul in an afterlife, the discount rate is corrected. It suddenly becomes completely rational to spend your entire life carving a single stone pillar for a cathedral you will never actually see finished.
Right. And to be clear for everyone listening, the author isn't making a theological argument or telling everyone to go join a religion.
No, not at all.
He is asking a systems design question, like what is the secular equivalent of a 100-year time horizon?
Exactly. Because modern secular systems, like a 4-year democratic election cycle or a quarterly corporate earnings report, they simply do not reach the temporal scale needed to solve massive civilizational problems.
Like climate change or infrastructure decay.
Right. And Ourabi points out that without a motivational architecture that extends beyond our own lifespans, we inevitably fall victim to Goodhart's law.
Goodhart's law, let's break that down because it really feels like the invisible gravity governing this entire book.
It is. So Goodhart's law basically states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Right, the classic nail factory example.
Yes, if you manage a nail factory and you measure your workers' productivity by the sheer quantity of nails they produce.
They will give you thousands of tiny, completely useless pins.
Exactly. And then if you realize your mistake and change the metric to the total weight of the nails produced.
They will give you a handful of giant, impossibly heavy hunks of iron.
Right. The moment the metric becomes the goal, rational actors will optimize for the metric at the expense of the actual purpose, which in this case was to make usable nails.
So how do historical frameworks solve for Goodhart's law then?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author introduces the Maqasid al-Sharia, or Islamic law, as a historical example of an honest, objective function.
How does it work differently?
It operates differently than our modern compliance dashboards because it doesn't start with rigid, quantifiable rules. It starts with overarching purpose.
Okay.
It outlines 5 protected essentials: the preservation of life, intellect, lineage, wealth, and meaning. It legally places the purpose above the rule.
So if a metric conflicts with the purpose,
If a specific metric or law begins to harm human life or intellect, the law is immediately suspended. The purpose always wins.
wow, that is a massive paradigm shift from how our current corporate and governmental dashboards work,
Totally.
where the metric is treated as an absolute god, even if achieving it destroys the very purpose it was originally supposed to track.
Yeah. Furthermore, Ourabi brings in a proverb from that same tradition. Your leader is a shadow of who you are.
I love that quote.
It's great. And he isn't making a philosophical statement about morality here. He is making a point about systemic causality.
Meaning?
We constantly complain about short-sighted politicians or greedy CEOs.
All the time.
But those flawed leaders are merely reflections of an underlying architecture that enthusiastically rewards short-term, legible metrics at every level of institutional life. The leader is just a mirror of the dashboard we have all agreed to use.
We have really zoomed out here. I mean, scaling all the way up to civilizational collapse, centuries-long time horizons, and historical law.
It gets deep.
It does, but a deep dive isn't useful unless it lands back on the ground.
Right.
What does this mean for you, the listener, when you wake up tomorrow morning and go to work?
Well, the author provides a very direct, grounded call to action. Tomorrow morning, look at a system you manage, a project you are leading, or even a major personal decision you are about to make, and just ask Melik's 3 questions.
Does this account for its broader environment?
Right. What is the honest time horizon of this choice?
And what is the carried forward balance I am leaving behind?
Exactly. You aren't going to find a mathematically perfect answer. What you're looking for is the gap between the comforting dashboard in front of you and the messy reality of the world.
And on a more intimate level, check on your own inner-outer drift. Are you managing your daily presence just to satisfy a legible dashboard, optimizing for the followers, the resume bullet points, the tracked productivity?
Or are you capable of being truly present with the irreducible human being sitting right in front of you?
Right. Are you cultivating your own unscalable, high-fidelity data set like Hannah did with her notebook?
There is this really sobering moment late in the book involving a character named Brian. He is standing near the ruins of a 12th century wall.
I remember that scene.
And he realizes that having a perfectly clear, rational analysis of a system's failure does not automatically generate the political or social motivation required to actually stop the collapse.
Clear sight doesn't equal salvation.
Exactly. However, if a catastrophe does come, the post-crisis architects who have to rebuild society will desperately need a blueprint. They will build whatever comes next based on their understanding of why the previous system failed.
So this framework,
These 3 difficult questions is the necessary blueprint to ensure that whatever gets built on the other side of the collapse is actually finally honest.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. One that takes this civilizational framework and applies it directly to your own life ledger.
Yeah.
Imagine that solar flare actually hits tomorrow. It wipes out your resume, your bank account balance, your digital footprint, and your social media followers.
Yeah.
It instantly vaporizes all of your perfectly measurable, highly legible outer metrics.
Everything.
What exactly is the carried forward balance of your inner life that would remain when the dashboard finally goes dark? What do you actually have left to light the way?